Okay, let's go ahead and get this party started. We are remote today because of Yom Kippur. I'm also recording today for those people that need help. All right, I'm going to share this link, but it's a good explainer of what JPA is. I'm not going to explain, I'm not going to use all this detail. Obviously, I'm not covering this whole thing. It's ridiculous to do so, but I'll share the link with you. Essentially, JPA is Java's persistence architecture, right? And what that specifically means is, sorry, um, it's obviously organized with persistence, but what it specifically means is Java is going to give it, provide a way to map data objects to databases. Um, and we can control how that persistence is managed, which is actually pretty cool. Essentially, it's an object relational mapping, so it maps objects to relations, and so that's what we've been missing. So JDBC did the auto configuration, which was great. It did connection pooling and all those things, which is also great. But we still had to create something called a row mapper. We still had to do a bunch of things to make it work. We won't need to do that with JPA. But JPA actually has a lot more things built into it. So we have to annotate our objects. We have to specify what kind of persistence we want. We have to create a repository. We have to do some things in order to make it work. However, once it's pretty much in operation, it's fairly easy to understand. So that's what we're going to work with. You can look at this explainer as you want all day. It goes into much more detail than I will. And I don't really need to. We're going to go ahead and start though. So I created a project. I'm going to create a project today. It's a Maven project, Java 2.74, whatever. The group is this, October 5th is the thing. We're going to add some dependencies today that are not trivial. So we're going to go with Spring Web. Okay, I'm going to try to see what happens when we do MySQL and just add the driver and see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? We remove it from the configuration, right? And then we want to select JPA, Spring Data JPA, big, and that's it. Eventually, one other, we're almost to the end of this. There's only one more thing we'd actually do, and that's validation, which we're not going to actually add, but we can do bean validation. So we're going to do that later, but we don't have that yet. So let's go ahead and generate it. And downloads October 5th. That sucker, put it on my desktop. I have good news too. I was able to find flaming hot munchies at the grocery store. So I look forward to grading your homeworks, which I just downloaded today. And where is it? October 5th. Okay. So I left open the one. The one, if you recall, was from last class. And it's got the controller, the student controller, and so forth. It doesn't use the JDBC template. It just uses the JDBC. So there we go. We still have build issues over here because it needs to download those dependencies. And there you go. It's downloading the dependencies. Yay! So you just select build with dependencies, and it'll build the dependencies. Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. I'm also going to check some stuff when it's done. I want to make sure it's downloading the proper MySQL files. And I'll show you how to check that. You should never need to do this. If something doesn't work right and you want to, you're welcome to do so. Boom. So it can't automatically configure. So try to run it, I think, and it can't automatically configure for a variety of reasons. That's fine. Let's go back to the POM. So there's boot and there's MySQL, and it's loading MySQL connector. And then it's just calling it runtime. So I think it's doing it. We're going to go ahead and assume it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter, right? We can always come back and fix it later. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new package here called student. And I'm going to copy the things from here, including my exception handler. I'm going to leave off exception controller because we don't need that. That was the thing that just threw exceptions. So we'll go ahead and refactor it. And by the way, I didn't mention this because I don't care. But for those of you that don't know, what manages your dependencies, it's actually this file, the POM file, manages your dependencies. So you should see a dependency here for MySQL connector. And we don't, so this is going to be fun. But if it's, like I said, if it screws up, we can easily fix it. All right. So before we go any further, JPA does require configuration. As we saw from the previous one, we're going to have an auto wired, which means it's going to be configured essentially from the properties file. So what kind of properties do we need? Well, the good news is it's roughly the same as the one before. I mean, pretty much the same thing. So spring, I should have opened it. I didn't. Oops. URL equals. Yeah, I'm just going to open the other one because they're all the same except for one. I put them in new folder, I believe. And last class was October 3rd. Come on, Ruth. There we go. Open October 3rd, 2 is the one we're looking for. And I don't really care about that. I just want the other sources so I don't have to type these out. Typing them out sucks. Because they're the same. They're almost all the same. The configuration stuff we need is still connecting to the database. So we still need all these things. We do need the data source driver class name. We do need the URL. We do need the user and password. None of that changes. We just have one additional configuration tool, configuration thing, and that's string gpa.hibernate. I'm sorry, I can't read my own handwriting. Yes, I'm screwing that up. Okay, that's auto and equals none. So I'm going to explain this part. So as an object relational mapping, it's going to map objects to the data source. By default, it tries to figure out whether or not, based on the URL, whether or not it should auto configure. In other words, it's going to drop the table and create the table on demand. We don't want to do that. We want to control our creation and our separately in other files. If you do have it created, it's going to recreate it every time you run it. And that's going to be very, very bad for your final projects. Like, we're talking low grades, guaranteed. So we don't want to do that. We want to control it using the mechanisms we did essentially for homework 1. So we're still going to do that. But that's the only other thing. I want to point out that I do have I'll send you this link as well. We don't want to do any database schema initialization. You can specify and control it, create, drop, validate, update, and so forth. You can do validate. Sometimes people do validate. It only checks to see if the schema matches the entities. If it doesn't match the entities, the startup will fail. Otherwise, it doesn't do anything else. Create drops destroys the schema on close, like the system close. We use these for like testing, but we don't use these in real terms. So don't do anything other than none. Even validate is a bad idea. I'll share this link as well, although it doesn't matter because I don't want you to do anything other than none. All right, so we have it configured. Now, we have a student controller and we're going to run it. All I'm doing, I didn't do anything yet. I just popped in it's all JDBC code. What we're going to do essentially is when we're closer to being finished, we're going to make sure that, and look at that, It loaded the correct driver, so we don't have to do anything. Well, that's good. You'll also note that it's got pooling sources. It's got a JPA factory and so forth. We have JPA up and running, which is great. We didn't have to actually do anything. But note that we're not actually using JPA for any purpose. And JPA it's unfamiliar with JPA at any point at this time. So yay. But as an object relational mapping, what we're going to actually need to do is map objects to the relational database, right? That's what object relational mapping means, right? So how do we do that? I'm actually going to close all these things and I'm going to, oops, I want to stop the output. We're going to identify, oops, sorry, that's one. That's not what I want. Leftover fit. Did I put the wrong thing in the wrong place? No, we ran it. It worked. Okay. So what we're going to do eventually is modify our student controller to use JPA, auto-wired configuration, as opposed to what's called. But first, we have to annotate our student. So our student is going to be a data access object. And as a data access object, we're going to identify parts of it that are important for various purposes to the database. This is very, very important. We cannot screw this up. Now, I'm going to screw it up just so we can screw it up, right? If I specify entity, this is indicating that this is an object that should be mapped to a table in the database. That's what I'm saying. When I have entity, that's what it's saying. Now, by default, it finds a class named student. It's going to look for a student table. Because of the way we name tables and so forth, if you look back at our selects from student, right? If it doesn't work, we need to change the table. We can specify the table. And we can specify it by doing this, right? And that would indicate that it is, in fact, a table. But I'm going to comment this out because student is named the same as student, so this should work. It has to have a couple of factors associated with it, so we need an entity ID. So I'm going to use the SID field, right? And so we have to identify a field that is going to be used as the primary key. You can use a set of keys as well, but remember, we're going to keep it really simple. We're going to implement the Java serializable interface. That's also necessary. Serializable controls. Okay, so what is it done? There's no ID. There's the ID. Here's an ID. Did I label it wrong? Nope. It's not labeled wrong. It's serializable ID. One other thing we might want to do, you have major GPA and so forth. It's going to use the GPA name to match the column. If for some reason you want the column name is wrong and you want to save and you want to change the column name, you can specify oops. I'm going to comment this out because we don't need it here. We can specify the column and then we do the same thing, name. In this case, we don't need to do it, so I'm going to comment it out, but you can absolutely do that if you need to. If for some reason your field is different named than your, what's called, and the error has gone away because it wasn't supposed to be there. I've just, unfortunately, I generated the SID. I generated the SID, and as a result of doing that, it was waiting for a check or something. I don't know. So as soon as I modified somewhere else. Now we're going to leave off column name and table name student because we don't need it, but this is our entity. I urge you to do the same things I'm doing here. Okay, note, I didn't do anything other than annotate that class. At a minimum, you need an ID, right? All your tables should have a primary key. So your ID is specifying a primary key. You could have multiple IDs and you can have multiple, it's a pain in the butt to do so. I'm not even going to go over it. So don't do it. But we need at minimum an ID here. You need to specify entity. If you need to specify the table name, you can, but we also needed to implement serializable. Those are the minimums, right? And again, if you have a column name that doesn't match a field name, you can change it as well. It's pretty easy. I like to keep the names the same as the fields, as you can see, just so that I don't have any issues, right? I don't know how it treats capitalization, but we're about to find out since SID, GPA, and major are going to have some fun with that. But anyway, like I said, we're going to do absolutely nothing other than annotate the class, and we're going to run it. If there's any issues with the entity specification, we'll find out now, as opposed to doing a whole bunch of things and then realizing it's a problem. I urge you to do that. Later on, we do validation. We're going to, you'll note because I'm not validating, it's not even checking, but at least my configuration isn't wrong. I don't have any issues with that. But I want to point out later on, when we go to validate, we're going to be able to put annotations here to indicate what is considered valid. For instance, SID should be a number between, I don't know, 1,000 and 999, right? Or whatever, you know, a 4-digit number. Name can't be blank. Major can't be blank, those type of things. And we'll be able to specify that later on by just using this. But basic JPA looks like this. There's nothing special about it. The Java object. But this is actually controlling the connection, mapping this student object to the table student. Again, without the table name, right? We don't need this if the table, if the object name is the same as the table. So in this case, it is. In a previous homework, it wasn't, but whatever. And of course, column name. All right, so we got that. So let's go play with student controller. Now comes the fun part. Yay! You ready for the fun part? This part, you remember how little code we had to do to make everything work? Oh, we have one more thing we have to do. I'm sorry. I did forget one more thing. We have one more thing. Sorry. We have to create a repository. And it's just a simple little class. And then we're going to call it a student. I can't spell repository. Yay. And it's a good news. It's a public interface, right? Which we're not actually going to do anything. You're going to love this, right? We're going to extend CRUD repository. I'm going to be able to spell repository here, guys. And we're going to use it for, here's where the magic happens. We're going to use a student followed by an integer. We go, wait, what? So we're going to just do the import. Okay. So CRUD repository is going to let us do all the CRUD things: create, read, update, delete. We don't actually have to implement anything to get that. Okay. What is we doing? It's mapping the student to the table. So that's all that's happening, right? The student, we already mapped a table, the student table to this entity, right? This is an entity class. So the repository is going to map, it's going to actually do the work for us. It's going to be what we create that connects us to that object. And you're going to love this. By default, it gives us all the CRUD things. We don't have to do anything special for create, read, update, and delete. The entire student controller class, I don't think I have, do I have a collapse all? No, I don't. Crap. The delete mapping, the put mapping, and the get all students and the get individual student, we're going to be able to do all of that, all of it. Insert, update, delete. We're going to be able to do all of that by just using the repository with no hidden BS involved. We won't need a connection. We're going to need an auto wired. Nope. I always misspell that. That's why I have this written down today. So I always misspell things. And then I have to look it up. Auto wiring, remember, is going to automatically configure it. And we want this because otherwise, you know what we have to do? We have to configure it manually. And that is no fun. So I like to say, we're going to call this the student service, right? And that, my friends, is it. Once we do this, we're no longer going to need this student controller here, but I'm leaving it so that it doesn't red flag everything, right? I'm going to get rid of students A. I think we just did students A, so we can just return an array list. So I'm going to get rid of that. And for now, I'm going to comment these out. Nope, I'm not going to comment out. We'll just leave them as is. Okay, so for now, I'm going to leave these in, and I'm telling you why I'm going to leave them in. So that allows me to change each, it's going to allow me to change each field by itself. Now, this is the first time that configuration actually happens, right? Earlier, we ran it with the configuration things, and we saw that it loaded JPA, which was great, but it didn't actually try to configure anything. Let's go ahead and run it and make sure it configures and so forth. I know it sounds stupid that I'm running it 6 times, but guess what? I'm also not having any problems, right? If you have a wrong driver name or something like that, you want it to die before you write a bunch of code. As you can see, it does a lot more than the previous system, right? It's got a lot going on. This is that JPA configuration and so forth. And you can see that it's configuring it itself. And you can read it if you want. I don't care. None of this stuff matters to me. But the student repository is now configured. If the student repository actually works the way we want it to work, we're going to be able to get the students. So first of all, get rid of you. Oops, actually, I don't want reds everywhere. I want to be able to compile it. So now we're going to go all the student service, and we're going to look at the mechanisms that we can call. We can just select find all. Yes, and you're like, wait, what? Find by ID. The reason why we specified the student repository student integer is the integer is the type of the ID. So that's why I want to specify integer. If you had string as the primary key, you'd want string in that second one. But in this case, we want to find all. We don't want to find all by ID or anything like that. That's it, right? And you're like, wait, can't be that easy, right? You guys often say this thing like it can't be that easy. However, this is now a one-liner. You're like, wait, what? It's now a one-liner. You might want to change this to iterable. It doesn't matter, right? Because that's, you know, how it is being mapped. But that's it, right? And so let's run it, try it out. It's a one-liner, find all, easy, right? Easier than writing a query that you have to remember, right? Oh, you're gonna love the query mechanisms later when we get to do that. I don't know if we're gonna get to do that today. I'm sorry. I don't know if we're gonna get to do that today. If there's a problem with an endpoint, you'd find out here. Let's go ahead and come on. There you go. Localhost 8080 students. Boom! Look at that. Ta-da! And you're like, no way. How did that work? I'm not sure what you wanted it to do, but it is in fact working exactly as expected. The difference is that we have an object relational mapping. So instead of having to find a query, we can do things like this. I'm just going to write it out separate so we can see it. Find all. Oh, by the way, an array list, had I left it as an array list would have been perfectly fine. And then I could just return the roster if you want. That's what we did earlier. I would say that's easier, right? For those of you thinking about doing homework too, that's a lot easier. Queries get a little dicey, but we have to do a bunch of things, right? This is what I mean by it requires more thought, but pretty easy. All right, let's do this is not trivial. So this is the one I want to talk about a little bit. Yeah, this is going to blow up no matter what I do. So I want to leave that there. Okay, so we know we're going to return a student, but now we have a problem. Student service dot find by ID. We have something called optional student. You're like, what the frick is that? Optional student O equals, right? And you go, wait a second. I've never heard of this Java util optional. It's not been around very long. But this is the preferred mechanism. I'm going to show you another way to do it, but it's not ideal. This is an easier, better way to do it. Excuse me. This is the preferred way to do it, I should say. Now, that check we see later, this if count, right? Did it actually return? We can do O dot. If it's present, we got to return O dot. Oops, sorry. O dot get. Right, we get the item that's represented by the thing. If it's not present, we're going to return. I think we return null, but we're not found. The count, the idea that we have to check to see if it's there, is built into the optional. There's another mechanism to do it. We'll show it to you when we see queries. But this is the preferred way to do it. In fact, I would stick with doing this. I would stick with doing it. Using the optional mechanism. It is relatively new to use the optional. Optional is helps us deal with situations where we might get something or we might get null, indicating that's not found, and that's what we do. If O is present, O.get returns guarantees a not null answer. What we'll do when we do the query later is we'll have a null possibility. Unfortunately, I'm going to leave these two alone or get rid of them. I'm not sure if we want to get rid of them right now. Yeah, we'll leave them. I don't care. Post mapping. I can get rid of this. Post mapping is inserting a student. Okay, so look at all this SQL stuff. Oh my god, right? So it takes a student, right? Now this is the part I can never remember, so I gotta look at my cheat sheet. So what we're gonna do is save. And it's not this, it is S. And I forget. What does save return? It returns S. Okay, I think I screwed this up, which is okay because I have the fix right here. All right. That's delete. That's not what I wanted to do. Oh yeah, I remember. We want to avoid it being added. And if it's already there, we want to prevent it from being there. So we don't want save by default. I'm sorry. We need to check to see if it's there. So the way to do that is I always forget this. Exists by ID. So we can check the SID. If it exists, already there, else add it. And add it looks like this. right? We just save it. We're persisting it essentially, so we just save it. So this one's the one where we say it was found. And this is the one where we say it is all done and okay. Oops. Okay. If we save it, whatever was there will be replaced. We won't throw an exception, that type of thing, but whatever is there will be replaced, which isn't ideal. But that is a lot easier than using JDBC raw, obviously, or using the JDBC template. It's actually easier than even using the JDB template. And it also reads, I like to say it reads. This is why I think I prefer JPA also, because it reads very, very well, right? It's reading like it makes a lot of sense, right? And so I feel like that is very, very useful. All right, so the put mapping is a simple replacement, and I brain dead here. Sorry, I have got this backwards. Hold on, I got this backwards. Am I missing code? No, I'm not missing code. Delete, delete, delete. Oh, I did 3 deletes in this previous mechanism. That's what's wrong. Aha. So we need to also see if it exists. If it exists, we save it. Otherwise, we return not found. So it looks just like this guy. And so we're going to copy this guy, which is the logic is reversed, right? So we're going to find a lot of things look like the insert. Does it exist? If it exists, that's when we want to, right? That's what we want to save it. Right? That's when we want to save it. That's when we return okay. When it's not found, we return the status not found. That is that. Yay. All right. Want to do a couple more things. We have post put. We only update if it's there, of course. And that's that. Delete's actually even easier. But we want to return whether or not it is in fact actually deleted. So I have 2 delete mappings, unfortunately. So let's figure out which one I really want. I don't want it to be in a try catch. Yes, we can't delete it. It will throw an exception if we delete it. So we need to do this thing again. In fact, just copy this again. So we need to make sure it exists. Right. So we pass it the SID. We make sure it exists. If it is existent, what do? We delete it. How do we do that? Student service dot delete. Now, we don't have an entity. We could go get it, but I don't want to do that, right? You actually should, because we're trying to return. If you look at the return here, oh, it's just returning the SID, but we frequently will return the object. But what we do is we can delete by ID, and that will make it go away. So we just change this to SID, and that's the situation where everything's okay. Oops. And this is, I don't remember. Is that close? Yeah, it worked. What's really important is we don't go to add it. Not there. Okay. That is a very fast, I mean, if you're looking for the fastest way to write what you call it, You got it. I want to show you a couple other things, just because we can do it really quickly. I'm going to go ahead with another get mapping. Students num. Oh man, I just want to grab a right. There's no path variable here. In fact, there's no anything. We don't throw a SQL exception anymore. We don't need to throw a SQL exception anymore because we're not running JDBC. I just didn't fix those methods, and I'm not going to because I don't really care. Sorry. So we need an integer equals, and this is the thing where this thing really shines. So student service has all these methods, including count. We can find all that have certain IDs. We can do quite a few things, but one of the things that's really useful is accounts. Why are you unhappy? Yeah, I don't care. It should be a log. I don't care. And then we're going to return. Sorry, brain farting. And then we're just going to return that count. Right? And the real benefit of this, of course, is we don't have to do anything in order to make this work. Like we don't have to create a SQL query for a count. We don't have to do anything, but we can have a count of our database anytime we want to, which is pretty awesome. We also can do a couple other things we don't care about, so I'm not going to worry about them, but here's all the code, and we're going to go ahead and run it. This is why all that setup was so important. I'm going to look and see what the warns are, though. JPA configuration. Yeah, we don't want to explicitly configure that because I don't care. Okay, so registered driver was not found, trying direct instantiation. And because I installed it somewhere else, it was fine. Because you can see it here, it was loaded from the whatchamacallit. So works out great. It doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and create open Postman. If Postman is configured and it's installed on your system, good news, the good news is, guess what? All these queries that we use to get all the students, to put the students, to delete the students and so forth are all still dismiss updates, are still there, right? So we can send a request, boom, right? You can add a student. If you remember, we had it in the body. Boom. I can run it twice just so you can see it found it the second time. We can put, I think I changed my name. Yeah. And biology and other stuff. Ta-da! Changes it, right? So it all just works. And you're like, how does that work? I'm changing 90210. Let's just change 90210. Probably not found, right? No, it found it. Oh, because I made my SID 90210. I forgot I did that. And then we do the get, and it should be gone, right? That's pretty awesome. JPA, yes. I will admit that we have, over the last 3 days, implemented the same controller using different services, JPA being the most recent one. However, I want to also point out that JPA also uses connection pooling. JDBC template uses connection pooling as well, but JPA also does it. JPA has a couple added benefits. You can see the little amount of code from the object relational mapping. Find all just gets everything. And the reason for this is actually quite simple. These queries, the things I wrote, are the basic queries, right? Post mapping, what are we doing? We're adding an entity, right? And that's how we do that. If we're finding if an entity exists. If it exists, we save it, right? We're updating it, right? And the delete, of course, deletes it, right? These are well-known, very common things to do. And as a result, guess what? JPA provides an easy mechanism to do it. However, what about the students by major? What the hell do we do there? Well, JPA contains a query mechanism. Y'all gonna love this. And you're like, wait a second, what do you mean? And it should show, yeah. JPA show has a query mechanism, and I'm gonna show it to you in just a second. Oh, there you go. We can query creation from method names. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Wait, oh yeah. The second I did that, this is not gonna work. So we're gonna go ahead and, yep, of course. I just comment that out and we should no longer see an error. Yay. So because the connection, I killed the connection. That's why we wanted, but major, I want to show you the alternate method to get a single student using a student repository. What we're going to do essentially, I'm going to return a student. And I don't remember, I didn't write this down. So yay, no, I did not write this down. Student nope. I'm brain farting. Give me 1 second. Find by, that's all I need. Sorry. I need to start it with find by. And then I want it to be SID. Right? And then how do I specify that? What? I just put an int. Oops. I need this to be bigger. And you're like, wait a second. This is an interface, right? Does anybody see like there's no method body here, but I'm going to find by SID, right? SID is a field name. And so I can use any field name that I want. Find by SID, since it's a primary key, should only return 1. But this is where things are going to get a little wonky. So we're going to show you this, but this is not the proper way to do it. Okay. So now I'm going to call this students 2. And I'm going to call this get student 2. Oh yeah, we can maximize. Oh yeah, I didn't maximize it because of the thing was in the way. So we're going to call this get student by SID 2. Now find by ID. Yeah, find by SID. It no longer takes that. It returns a now we have to check and see if it's null. If it's null, if S is null, that means you couldn't find it. Right? That's what that means. And so we do need to do that check. The check still occurs, but that's why the optional is preferred. So look how nice the option is. Optional is comparatively. But guess what? Right? Remember the find by major? Well, wait a second. This isn't going to return a single student, right? No, it's not. It's going to return a list of students. Okay. Ta-da. Then we go in our student controller and we're going to undo the by major mapping. And comment you out still. We don't have to do any of this stuff. Leave the logger in, I guess. I want to leave the roster in as well. I just don't want it to be initialized. Right? Or just go equals Find by major. Right? We have some problems. It's we need to cast. But we really don't. We could actually cast this as a list, and that would be happy. It would be happy if we did that. Right? The array list is a list, so it would be happy. We don't need to do anything special. But now obviously we're gonna need to test it, right? So because now it's not obvious, right? Wait, hold on. I got an error still. Hold on. No, I don't. It just thinks I have an error. Don't you love life? All right. Living life long. Okay. So we could go very much more complicated. In fact, after we talk about the project, we could talk about native queries. We'll talk about more queries. We'll talk about really complicated queries, but it's really going to follow that document I just showed you guys. It's this, right? You can do and, ors, you can use distinct, you can use less thans, you can use less than or equals, greater than or equals, ands and likes and so forth, all by just creating a method name. And if that doesn't work for you, you can go ahead and create a custom query as well. So now, don't care about you. Let's go ahead and get localhost students. I like to make sure it's working. Look. Right? And we got IT. We have all the majors represented. Well, not all of them, but we're going to say students by major. And then the major is IT. And we'll give it a shot. I was kind of hoping it would blow up or do something wrong, but it works. And you're like, wait, what? All right, couple of things we have to know when we're creating our repository methods. Find by major, the by major, it's got to be next. Find by SID, it's got to be next. If I want to find by major, I'm going to just show you this. And I don't know, GPA less than, and I put an integer GPA as an example. I'm not even going to put it in my actual controller. This should fail. This should not actually run properly. Oops. Shoot, I closed the wrong one. Run. So we want to make sure that we're doing what we expect to do. Because we don't want that to happen. And most of what that is trying to map a query to the actual repository, and it can't. It can never do it. And why is that? Pretty simply, student repository, find major, and GPA less than. GPA is not an integer, right? So it should be double. Also, did I spell less than correctly, I should say. Yes, I did find by age less than, and I did or and. And is supposed to be A and D. Nope. Spelling matters, right? So maybe that was the actual failure, but anyway, it would have failed either way. This should work. Ta-da, it did work. Couple of things I want to point out. We do have another method here by major and GPA less than. I literally just created it. I didn't realize I was doing it. But we can go ahead and return that then, I guess. I mean, right? Right. What's the path variable? Yep. Boop, boop, boop. And there you go. It's going to make us want to cast it to a list, and that's fine. But there you go. I wasn't trying to do that on purpose, but there's your other mapping. This actually makes your life so easy because you can look for anything. You can even do a between. I don't do a between because I don't really care, but you can do a between. I'm trying to find the between. The between. Yeah. No. Is it not in here? If you do a between, there's one way to do it. Very simple without doing all this. I do believe they have between. I will look it up. Unfortunately, I do not have it here, but you can always do blah, 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 trying to think of the word is less than and greater than. I'm trying to think of it's there. It's the fifth one. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So start date between though. Oh yeah, that's just the method name. Yeah. So I can do something like, yeah. So I'm sorry, I was just thinking that that wasn't there. So find by GPA between, right? I think I can say between. Do I have to say something else? No, I need to say between. And then a GPA is a double, so I want to go double start, double end, right? So you can even do things like between, which makes life so easy. And it'll actually find all the students that have GPAs between those. If you wanted to find GPA end, like for instance, you can go end major equals or not major equals. I'm trying to think how we do that. We don't say and. Yeah. So we just say the name. Right. And major, right? So you can just say major, and that would work as well. The key thing is if you make any changes here, it's very, very important that you run your application because it'll test to see if these endpoints are possible to map. So before you even put it in your controller, it's very, very useful to do that. Obviously, I'll share this with you. There's no find by first name containing. We don't have to create crazy parameters and so forth when we have these. We're actually ahead because I went faster than I expected to. So let me think. Is there anything else I want to look at? We have or, we can separate them with or as well. Distinct isn't that important to me. Less than, greater than, equal. After, before, if you're interested in dates. We don't allow any null things in our stuff because I just kept it simple. Starts with, ends with, contains. Most of what you're going to want is containing, and then you can order by as well. And you just say order by the field and then desk, and then that's it. Yeah, I'm actually running out of things to talk about today because I didn't want to use any queries. Let's order by, what is it? SID. Before we, oops. Yeah, that one is actually being used, and so it's going to fail. Okay, so now that is working. Let's go ahead and run it. Order by is kind of fun, but you always want to test any changes you make to your file by running it. The query system is actually quite easy. So yeah, usually I think I'm behind, which is why I think I'm running out of things to say. I'm trying to think of what else to add. One of the things you're going to encounter I hate to be that guy that tells you this, but you can see the SIDs in the past were actually ordered by ID by default because they were inserted by ID. But now they're going to be guaranteed by ID. We can also do something like ascending is the default. We can also do something like right, descending by saying des. And of course, now we have to put the desk here. I think it's DES. Let's see. Order by. I did order by. Yeah, it's spelled out. It'd be ascending if you wanted to do ASC, but ASC is the default, so you don't usually specify anything other than descending if you want it to be in descending order. It doesn't really matter. Coffee this morning. Maybe I had too much coffee. So we're going to get out of here a little bit early today if it keeps up. So I think that'll be pretty good. So now I'm just going to send the same query. And the last time it ordered it by ID because it was in ID order. And you go, what do you mean? Well, when I send a query, it just gives me the order in which they were essentially inserted. So usually the numbers increase. You're like, wait, what? There's no order by ID. There's no intent to order, but it happens to be ordered. So that's why I threw the descending in there. It's just so we can see it in a different order. And that's what that is. Did we do the count? I don't think we did the count. Let's do the count. Right. And then we're going to do, I'm sorry, I already forgot. We did it at the very bottom of our student controller. I don't think we've ever tested it. No. And they're 5, right? This is useful when you're testing your system, but I'm going to ask you that if you're testing your stuff, please remove all testing stuff. It's very easy to have a student controller and say a test controller, with the test controller having the stuff that you don't actually want me to look at, as an example, and then maybe delete that just before you turn it in. You can do that very, very easily by just adding another controller. Let me think. I think we are pretty much where we should be. I'll make sure to share this with you. The only thing we haven't actually discussed that I was going to actually wait is we can actually declare, we can use query keyword to identify, what's the word? We can use the query mechanism to have specialized queries. This is weird. And so I don't usually do this on the same day I do all the other JPA stuff because I don't want to confuse you. But we typically use native queries because it's just going to be easier. But they do use placeholders, so we do need to talk about that. And that's really the last thing we need to talk about. So a couple of things. I'm going to grade homework 3 today. I have the Munchies Flaming Hot Munchies to do so. So I'm going to grade it today. I'm going to share these things with you later today. But what was I going to say? Yeah, homework 2 still out there, but homework 2, I'd much prefer you guys actually play with JPA because your final project is going to be required to be in JPA. There's no option to use JDBC template or JDBC raw. The other thing I'm going to urge you is you're going to find a lot of example code online, as I know you students do. Dr. Google, when you have trouble, we are going to expect that you guys have the initialization code separated from your controllers. So I don't want to see ever, right? Anything other than this type of thing, right? It should look just like this. Username and passwords are user and user for everyone. DDL should be none for everyone. The driver should be this for everyone. And the URL should just be your last name changed, right? And this goes for your final project as well. I've seen a lot of people download a final project and turn it in. and then be surprised when I find out that they lose massive points for simple things. So I would just urge you to be cautious. I'm aware of the amount of code that's online. Yes, and there's often hidden readmes and stuff like that in your code that often give it away. So be careful. Okay, we're going to expect that you're going to include the creation code. We can do that very simply. I'm just going to do it now. I'm going to call it initdb. And then I might write my code. I didn't have it. I didn't done homework 1 yet. So I'm going to do it today. But like I could have my initdb in here. So if I needed to reset the database or I wanted to go from 5 to 5,000, I could do so very, 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 very quickly. And that's very, very useful. Yeah. So we have a student that has a Mac, and due to the fact that he has a Mac, he has to use in order to get MySQL to work for him, he has to use a longer URL, which is fine. But that's just changing the fact that you need special things in your Mac. They don't change the fact that it works for us. It works for me. Note that direct messages, once I go look at them, I'm sharing my screen. So direct messages are broadcast. And of course, recorded. One time I had to not share a recording because I actually opened my email by accident. And that is a big, big no. All right. And we see the get students ID, the logging. The logging feature is super useful. But I think I'm not going to kill you guys. I'm going to let you guys go 15 minutes early today. It's a good day to do so. I went very quickly. I apologize, but it is all recorded. What am I going to say? Yeah, that is it. Pretty much. All right. I'll grade your homeworks today, likely. October 17th, just coming up. Just note that October 17th will be recorded. Also, for those that aren't in the know, I mentioned this at the very beginning of class, but probably nobody heard it or remembers that I said this. The week of Thanksgiving will be recorded as well, because I know so many of you were traveling, so it'll be recorded in advance. 11/21 will be recorded in advance and be shared with you. So 11/17 or not 11/17, 10/17, right? And 11/21 will be recorded. These are not going to be remote. Nobody's going to log into Zoom that day. These will be just shared with you on Blackboard like we do typically. And so just be aware of that. At 11/21, the reason for that is we have a Monday, Wednesday class, and as a result, we have a Monday class the week of Thanksgiving. Many of you that have Monday and Tuesday classes that week would wish they would be remote or online so that you can travel and do what you want to do. Sorry. Anyway, next class 10/10 will be in person again, and we'll go very, very quickly. So you want to make sure you're on time. I'm going to leave a lot of room for people to ask questions. I'm going to do the native query thing. I'm going to do some more queries with Spring JPA, and then we're going to do some more queries and stuff. More complicated queries, if you will, but we're mostly going to talk about the project, which is, big percentage of your grade. And you'll note the other things that don't make any sense, right? Like homework 2, homework 3, you get that. But PID, PDR, PPR, those are all be explained. Those are the deadlines for those things. So we will do those. And that is Columbus Day for those that don't know, right? I got a joke for you guys. My wife's a perfect 10, but Excel thinks she's October. So sorry, I had to share that one. Anyway, or I should say, I think my wife's a perfect 10, but Excel thinks she's October. So that's funny right there. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but anyway, grumble, grumble, grumble. I didn't want you to think that I didn't have any dad jokes today. But if you have any questions going forward about homework 2, let me know. Yeah. Any other questions, problems, complaints? Okay. All right. Y'all have a great day. And you're welcome for letting me go early, but it also means I went a little faster than I meant to. So I'll go over some stuff again. Anyway, y'all have a great day.